Good morning, good evening everyone, and welcome to a new episode in this beautiful serverless application. In our expenses tracker so far, we do have attachments, transactions, wallets, and almost all the functionality needed to get or to have an expenses management software. There is some queries needed, but there is a big missing part, which is the users, right? Currently, we don't have any users. We don't even have the functionality to allow new users to be onboarded to the system, create accounts, and so forth. So, as always, you know me very well. I like Active Directory B2C, my favorite identity service for business to consumer software, as the name of the service indicates. So we're going to utilize this one to allow users to sign in and create accounts. And then this out-of-the-box beautiful service has very, very powerful features that's going to simplify the process of identity. It's a free as long as you are less than 50,000 users, which is a very big number. And we do have a lot of capabilities to make for everything identity related, like reset password, email confirmation, phone confirmations, two-factor authentication, social media login or social identity providers. We do have almost all the possibilities just a few clicks away. So what we are going to do specifically today is set up this Azure Active Directory B2C tenant, and then we are going to link it into our application. So whenever the user creates an account and logs in for the first time, we trigger this function, and this function in return will check if this user who is trying to log in, if he has an account, so okay, it will use it, otherwise it will create a profile in our Cosmos DB database. So it will be divided into two sessions, one where we are going to set up the cloud or the B2C provider and the function related to be triggered, and then in another video we are going to write small logic to communicate to our Cosmos DB. Alright, so before I start, I just want to explain a concept, which is the Active Directory API connectors. So Active Directory B2C, as you know, it's an identity provider, business to consumers related. So whenever you have applications like our expenses tracker, like online store, like there is a business piece of software, and then there are commercial users or users out there, but those are like individuals, not companies. Even if they are companies, you can still handle them using B2C by doing some invite and tenancy management on your end, like some hybrid approach, but it works very well for that case. And you have the other Azure Active Directory, which is right now Microsoft Entra ID, where you have enterprise client that they can log in using their own work or school account. But let's focus into this today. New feature that has been introduced in API connectors, I think last year, which is the API connectors feature. This one allows to send or set up Active Directory B2C, so it sends an API request to your endpoints, an Azure Function or any endpoint you configure for Active Directory B2C, and then Active Directory will make sure to call those endpoints in three different cases. The first one is after federating with an identity provider. For example, whenever the user signs up with his LinkedIn account or Facebook account or Gmail, so your function will be called, and this data that came from that identity provider will be passed to your endpoint, and then you can do some extra validation. You can check if this account exists or not. You can provide some business logic before Active Directory actually creates that account. The second one is before creating the user. This one when the user is actually creating his account using the Active Directory B2C page and not signing in with a social provider. The third one, which is before token issuance, this one happens on every sign-in. And this is the one that we are going to use because this one fits more before creating the user whenever you have business validation or logic you want to execute before actually creating that user. But what we want to do every time the user signs in, we will check our database, and if that user is available, then use it. Otherwise, we will create that account entity. Because we don't have rules or permissions, I'll just come across those for learning purposes. But even in real life, our application won't need any of those permissions or rules. But we can utilize that. Previously, in one of the previous courses, Tickets Basket, I think, this feature wasn't there. API Active Directory doesn't send requests to your function, so we were doing that manually using a hybrid approach, or you can use custom policies, but right now we are good. We are going to see how we can set this up in like a couple minutes. So when Active Directory B2C sends a request to our endpoint, what does it expect? So basically, we can continue. We can indicate like, okay, we processed what we need, so you can proceed, or we can block like the value selected or the area you have selected we don't support at the moment, so we block the creation of the account, or we send validation error. Like we don't block the full sign-in, sign up process, but we just show a custom validation error that we want. So like fix this one and you can proceed. The next thing is how the flow will be. It's going to be very simple. We will have like the user will open the get started or login page, create an account using the sign up for the B2C, and after that the sign up and the create account will mainly whenever the user finishes, it will call a new Azure function we create called activate profile, and then this one will check our Cosmos DB. Do we have a user with this ID? If it does, okay, we just indicate to API connector that okay, continue. That's the type of action we are going to return, or we insert that user into our database and then we proceed. So that's going to teach you how to do this flow, but if you understand those processes very well, you can expand this for almost any kind of software you want. Even if you have complicated rules and permissions with API connectors, you can very easily manage that and have like this hybrid identity where you have Active Directory B2C takes care of everything, and then you have your rules and permissions. You can populate or enrich the token using API connectors. So the agenda for the stuff that we are going to practically work on: set up the B2C tenant, create the app registration and the policy for the API connector. We will set up ngrok or ngrok, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how to pronounce this thing correctly. I'm going to go across this just after this slide. And we will create the activate profile function. No logic will be there. We will just return and then implement the user profiles Cosmos DB repo. We will do that in another video, and also the logic of the function. All right, so what is this ngrok thing? Why do we need it? Basically, our function is running locally, right? HTTP localhost something, your port ID. But API connector is inside Active Directory B2C. So how, during the development phase, can B2C sends a request to our local Azure function that runs locally on our machine? Here is where ngrok comes into play. You can set up this thing very, very easy, very straightforward. I will show you in a moment. And then B2C will communicate with ngrok, and then this thing will redirect the request to your local Azure functions. So that's basically the stuff we want to do, and an overall idea of everything we want. So let's start with the first point, which is mainly setting up Active Directory B2C. So the first step, if you already don't have an Active Directory B2C tenant, make sure to log into your default directory on Azure, go to Microsoft Entra ID, and then click on Manage Tenants. And here you can click Create and simply pick Active Directory B2C, configuration, give it a name, like for example, expenses tracker. I already have one, so I'm not going to create one. And then here you give it like a domain, initial domain name, expenses tracker, okay, it's available. So you pick the geolocation of your area, and then you pick the subscription, the resource group, and you hit review and create, and that's all what you need to do. So you wait a minute or two, and then your tenant will be basically created. Fairly simple, very straightforward. Just those what you need, make sure this one would be unique for you. So now I do already have a tenant, so I'm going to switch. I think it is, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so this is our Azure Active Directory B2C tenant, the one that we're going to use. So I'm going to open my tenant, and then I'll go to app registrations on the left-hand side. That's the first thing we'll start with. create a new registration. I'll call it expenses tracker API. And for the supported account types, we need like anything, basically any identity provider or organizational directory. We don't care that much. We're not going to set this right now because at this moment we are not setting the authentication part specifically for our application. We are just setting like user management kind of flow, because the authentication will happen on this side and then we are going to protect our Azure function in a later step, but not during this video or this part of work. So you have here branding and properties, authentication, client and secrets, API permissions, all this stuff, like the general details of your expenses track or app registration. We are going to expose an API, add a scope, and save and continue. Okay, we have only one permission or one scope, so we'll call it full access, API.full access. Call it allow access for all expenses tracker features, just like that. All right, add scope, push description. Okay, I'll put this in the description. Okay, good. Okay, great. So we do have, this is the symbol. We are going to come back to this app registration later, but for now, let's go back to our Active Directory B2C, and then we need to create a user flow for our application. Sometimes if you have multiple applications, you can use the exact same flow for multiple apps, but we're going to create one from scratch, so you know how to do this thing. So you have multiple built-in user flows like sign up and sign in, profile editing, reset password, sign up only, sign in only. We need sign up and sign in, which is the default. Go with the recommended approach. And in here, you can give it a name. We can call it expenses tracker sign in up. I'll call it like this, or let's just do it like that. Okay, great. So identity providers here, if you want to set any identity providers, I already have two set, but we will configure this later. For now, we'll choose email sign up only. We will set up Google and GitHub whenever we publish our Azure function, but because those won't affect any way our code or stuff like this. So here, if you want multi-factor authentication, it's not needed on this side. So user attributes and token claims, what do we want? So basically just given name and surname. We're going to make it very simple to our customers. We don't care about their country or region, or maybe actually we do. So maybe we can provide them with some default currency or create a default wallet based on their country or region. But the less data you ask your customer, the better, the easier onboarding experience you provide, the better user experience overall. So those are the ones to be asked from the sign-in page. And here you have the return claim. So choose surname, country, show more. We need the email address, identity provider. Okay, retrieve the identity provider. And we need, okay, the object ID. And, okay, all right, email address, yes. Addresses, because it can be attached to multiple ones in the return. Okay, so this is the data that will be populated in the token whenever the user signs in, and the token that our app will use later in the client. Okay, great. So this is it, AK expenses tracker. This is the name of the policy. Right now we open, and we should be good. So now let's see how this policy actually looks like. So if we click run user flow, and I'll pick expenses tracker, where is that thing? Here we go, expenses tracker API, and okay, to use, actually we didn't set up a, okay, let's go back to the app registration. I'll go to app registrations and I will basically just create a new one. This one will be the client app. So I'll call it expenses tracker. So we will have two apps, one which provides the API and the one that will be the client application. And here we are going to pick for now web, like the redirect URL, jwt.ms, register. Okay, now here on the API app, you expose an API, but here we are going to utilize an API. So you pick API permissions, click add permission, and from here you pick my APIs. So the APIs that I have created, and we should see the expenses tracker over here. Okay, where is that? Why it didn't show up? Okay, you can search for it here. Expenses tracker API. Here we go. You have this permission. Okay, we need to access this. Okay, perfect. Now we can consent this permission for my tenant. So just click this button. Okay, now consented. So this one right now is a client app for the API one. Now we can go back to B2C user flows and expenses tracker, sign in up, go to run user flow, and I will pick the client application. So expenses tracker, here we go. This one, if you can see, it asks for like what resource you want to access. I want to access the API. So this is the scope that we need, API.full access. And right now, whenever after the user will create the account, we should be redirected to jwt.ms. So if we click run user profile, oh, here we go, look at that. That's what we have. So you'll be asked, oh, from where this background and icon, those can be set up in, if you go to user flow, you have here company branding. This is on the level of your whole tenant. That's why it's already set, because I have this tenant already. And this is the one that I use for my website and stuff like this. So you can click on here and you can set up your icons, logos, backgrounds, stuff like that. You have a bunch of customization that you can do. So if the user clicks sign in, I already have a user account in my tenant, a bunch of users, because I have said I'm using this tenant for other stuff too. And if the user doesn't have any, you can click sign up now. And that's how the sign up experience looks like. The user provide the email, send verification code, new password, confirm password, country, region, give a name, surname, create, and this will be created. We will do that after we set up the API connector. We're going to use some temp emails. All right, so let's try to sign in to see if all is going good. Okay, right now it returns an error because we canceled the process. So let's do that one more time. Going to user flows, expenses tracker, run user flow, and a big expenses tracker. I need access for this scope. All right, run user flow. Okay, sign in. Okay, perfect. Here we got the access token. It has not been shown here because this one is not an ID token, it's an access token for that scope. That's why we didn't see anything here. Okay, perfect. So all is good at this moment. Right now, whenever the user does the sign-in process that we have just done in here, we need our local project to run and then get notified about that user is signing in. So our Azure function will be triggered. So how we can do that? Let's go to your level of Active Directory B2C overall, and here you have a tab called API connectors. So you click, and you click on a new API connector. All right, so here you provide all the details that you want. So I'm going to call it expenses tracker API, and here you provide like the endpoint. So here's the interesting part where ngrok will be needed. So to continue with this, we need actually to move to Visual Studio. So right now we are in here. Let me just do one very basic thing. I will create a new Azure function and I will call it activate profile. And here it will be HTTP trigger, click add. All right, so we do have that Azure function. So activate the profile. Triggered, and I'm just going to read the content inside, like read the body, and we'll make it only post. All right, good. So here to read the body, we can just say var body as JSON request read as string async. Oops, we need to make task, and here we type await. All right, so we do have the string. We can just log it just to see what's inside, how this data actually looks like. Great. We are missing a namespace. Yep. Pick one. Great. So let's run this project. Okay. Like that. Okay. Because this one is contained into two different namespaces. Okay, great. Now let me run this functions project. And in the meantime, I'm going back to here to talk a little bit about ngrok. So this thing, if you want to install it on Windows, you can either install it using the chocolatey packages manager, or you can just normally install it using like a zip file. You click download, you will get it. If you are on Mac or Linux, all the details are provided here. It's super simple to set up. After you install, what you do basically is that you create an account. Once you create the account, you will be provided with a token. So just run this command: ngrok config add auth token. You provide your token, and then you're good to go. That's all what you need to do. Very simple. So let me check our Azure functions at the moment, and they are basically over here. Okay, we do get an error for what specifically? Delete unused attachments logger. Okay, we'll get back to this. It's fine. So now this one is running locally. So we need to redirect Azure, the API connectors in here, to the local Azure function that's running on my machine. And here we are going to use ngrok. So we open this. That's the URL we're aiming for, API activate profile. So what you will do is, I'm going to open another terminal. And you just provide the command ngrok http, and then here you provide your URL, like what URL you want to redirect to. So I want to redirect to localhost 7155. Brought it from here, right? Just put the base. Don't put like /API/activate profile. The redirect method will handle everything. So by just hitting enter, look at that, we got this beautiful forwarding link. So this one, if we trigger that, it will trigger our Azure function. So let's try. If I open this one like this, and then I'll go to /swagger/UI like this. If I open this thing, you'll see that we are getting access to this one, and that's good, right? Right now it's our Swagger endpoint is down, but we will fix it, no worries. So that's then how we are going to, that's the link we are going to configure for this, and then we say /activate profile. Or I don't like this URL, let's make it more convenient. Activate/profile. Oops, no. That's the name. So in here we can provide a custom route. equals /API/activate/profile. Okay, that's better. Now we run. And record while creating the route with activate profile template. Oops, sorry, it already contains the API. Here we go, just do that. Okay, so now it's running. Let's go back to Active Directory /activate/profile. And for authentication, you can either provide a certificate, because to not make your endpoint public. Whenever we publish our Azure function, we will secure it using an active code. But here, you can pass the username and password and then secure your endpoint using a basic authentication. But we are not using that, so we are providing save just for this moment. And when we publish the project, it will be protected already using an API key. Okay, great. Now we set up our API connector, which is very good. The next thing is to assign token enrichment, the token enrichment API connector for this API specifically. So if you go back to your user flow, the expenses tracker 1, on the left-hand side, you will see there is API connectors. So the API connector that we set on the level of the whole B2C tenant is going to represent like your directory of APIs, because you can have multiple applications, like in my case, linked to multiple APIs. Now, on the level of the flow itself, you say like, after federating with an identity provider, like after the user signs it with Facebook, GitHub, or LinkedIn, whatever, which API do you want to call? Like, I don't want to call any. Before creating the user, I don't want to call any. Those two are the most likely to be used, or even this one, whenever you have like a logic to process before actually creating the user, or allow the B2C to create that user. But we don't have any, so we are just interested in the one of the login, which is before including application claims in token. So for this one, I do have multiple endpoints. So I will pick the one that we just created, aka expenses tracker API. Look at that, and then we had save. To know more about this, I provided here first this article that explains everything about API connectors, very simple. And this one, how you can create an API connector to sign up a user flow. It contains all the details you want to learn deeply, like this is the data that it sends, and then enable the API connector in a user flow, that's how you enable it. Then the type of responses. See, like here you can say continue, this one you can show block page, and so on. We will do that in a bit. And this is the token enrichment API connector. So that's how you can use it to add more data to the claim, which is the same one we are going to use, but we are not feeding the token with any new claims. We just use it to check if the user is created or not. So this is the payload that we should expect: the email, the identities, and display name, object ID. This is the property that we care most about, and display name. Okay, now we set that up. We should be, if we run the flow, actually get our function triggered whenever the user signs in. Okay, so let me pick expenses tracker one more time, and make here this, run user flow, and I'll open this one. Okay, let's sign in. Here we go, you see, it has been called API/activate profile, and in here we got our breakpoint. Nice. So we do have the data, all going good. That was very simple, right? We didn't write any line of code. Everything was straightforward. So if we continue, okay, we do get the request one more time. So we do have an error, I think, most likely. Yep, we do have an error. Let's see. What does it say? Activate profile, invocation, exception thrown, okay, or unexpected end of request content. Unexpected end of request content. All right. Okay. So they are sending something in the request that's not. All right, so let's debug this thing very quick, see what is going wrong. So in here, oops, first let me check. Actually, I forgot if, so before it didn't manage to get a response with a continue, so it fails to sign the user in, which is the expected behavior. Now, I just want to check in here, token enrichment, post. Okay, we do have it post, which is what we need, but why it's failing to read the request? All right, so request dot content type. Let's check content type. Okay, logger, log information. Okay, great. Now, when it comes to the response, what we will do is we will return a new object to that API. Let's check their documentation. What are they saying about the response? Okay, continuation response. So that's how it should look like. Version, action, posted code in case we need to retrieve any claims, but we are not going to do that, so we'll just provide version and action. So version equals 1.0.0. And oops, this one should be an anonymous object, and action equals continue. Continue is capital. Okay, now let's try one more time. During this time, make sure that ngrok is always up and running. Keep in mind, if you are on the free version of this thing, every time you stop and run it again, you will need to change it will provide you with a different link, so you need to change the API connector. So basically, every coding session, like whenever you start, you'll have a new one. If you have paid version, then they can provide you with like a static domain and IP. So in this case, it will always be the same. So you provide it only once there. Great. Let's go one more time and click on Run User Flow. Sign in. Should get the request. There we go, we got it. And we check the content type, it's application JSON. All right. Okay, this one will return continue. So, oh, the login actually has been processed successfully. So we can now just parse the content that they sent. We do have an error reading the content. We're going to debug that. But anyway, now we have the function. We have its content. It's sending the request. The request that's coming from the API connector contains all the details that we need, mainly the object ID, display name, and region. Those are the three properties that we are going to populate in our database for the user profile. So we have almost everything we need. The next thing is actually read the content, execute the calls to the database, and then we have the activate profile function up and running. So whenever we publish online, it's going to be in a good state, and then we modify our API connector. So I know there was like a lot of pieces here and there, but this thing is very powerful. Like if you utilize it well, just think of the possibilities you can do with that. It's almost unlimited. Like you can have permissions as long as you can enrich the token, so you can add roles, permissions. You can make invitations. You can actually have a multi-tenancy, complicated software with like some kind of invites and stuff like this. So, but for our basic use case, that's all what we need to do. And I'm going to, after we implement our function, I'm going to show you very quick how you can extend the token with like a role property, or a role claim. So in this case, you can have role-based access or permissions based access, whatever how you want to customize your application. Just going over that to learn. So I think this is it for this video. It was a lot of pieces has been put together. In the next video, we have some little debugging to do and implementation of this function. All will be good. And after that, we do the learning process, and then we see where to go next into the continuation of our project. So I hope you enjoyed this session. Sorry for making it that long, but as promised early in this course, no scripting. So I'm trying not to script anything as much as I can. So the same way how I approach my daily work. So appreciate if you have made it to this point. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.